I'm Rev Kev, and I'm just honored to be with the police chief from my hometown, Middletown, Ohio. Talk about what's going on in our nation today and come from it from a Christ-centered perspective. We know right now tensions are high, and for several reasons. There's people that are on different sides of the fence on all the issues at play when it comes to police brutality, racial injustice, just the overall perception of police and just the racial tensions in this nation. But what we are commanded to do at the end of the day is figure out how to take that and how to courageously be able to work with one another for a better America, a better nation, a better world. And so I'm privileged to be with Police Chief David Birk.
It's good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. And so people are angry.
Yes.
People are hurting. People are frustrated. You have individuals, particularly from the Black community, who feel that policing hasn't been fair and just. And unfortunately, a few bad apples are starting to, perception-wise, spoil the bunch, which makes your job even harder. And now you have those who are trying to align themselves to support the efforts of policing, saying defunding may not be the best option. And so for me, I fall in the middle because I do believe that police departments who are using policies and procedures that are outdated, that are not effective, I think you need to take a look at that and try to figure out how to reimagine policing according to the communities that they serve. At the same time, I don't think eradicating police is in our best interest.
No, I understand the outrage. You know, what happened in Minneapolis is unexcusable, first of all. And nobody in law enforcement condones that. They really don't. But defunding the police, our job has evolved over the years so much. I mean, Sir Robert Peel had his, 12 rules of policing, and he kind of professionalized policing. And we follow those rules to this day, and with different programs such as accreditation, where you get standardized national policies and procedures. But defunding them, when we started police work, it was, you have someone that breaks the law. Now we do so many different things. We're marriage counselors on DV, domestic violence. We're mental health experts. We have to go to mental health issues. We have drug and alcohol issues that we deal with. We get calls that my 9-year-old won't go to school. What does that have to do? But we have to handle that because we go to everything. So I think police work's evolved so much over the years that defunding them is actually going to hurt worse than more reform and policy and training. When I started, we had 93 officers in Middletown. We're down to 68 officers right now. So we are already very low compared to national average, which is 2.4 officers per 1,000.
Mm-hmm. On a daily basis, you said Middletown has already been defunded in a sense, which has impacted staffing. Could you speak to like a daily account of what does that mean? How many officers could be serving city of Middletown or similar populations?
So right now the national average is 2.4 officers per 1,000. Well, we have 49,000 people. We should have 113 officers. We have 68 officers. So on a daily patrol, I'll have 6 officers working day shift. I'll have a minimum of 7 on 3 to 11s and 6 on midnights. So we're handling 6 officers for 49,000 people. That is a lot. And then you figure if there's a domestic violence or if there's a shots fired call, if there's someone fleeing, all those are 2-3 man calls sometimes. So it really takes a lot of our officers. And then obviously if we have a situation, there's an accident and someone has to go to the hospital, we have to send an officer to follow up at the hospital. We may have jail transports to Butler County. So it's really, really restricting our ability to do discretionary patrol. So that's why I think all the police departments are looking for alternatives such as community-oriented policing, trying to find different ways such as school resource officers have a huge impact with the school system and the kids.
I want to move to this thought. Isaiah 1:17, it says, learn to do good, seek justice, correct oppression, bring justice to the fatherless, plead the widow's cause. To me, the theme serve and protect is present in this passage. Obviously, this phrase or tagline, Chief, becomes burdensome, just like what I mentioned at the beginning, to most in the Black community because of the chain of events that appear to violate this principle. And certainly not just the recent events that affected a George Floyd or a Breonna Taylor or an Ahmaud Arbery, even though that necessarily wasn't law enforcement, but it was a former law enforcement officer that was involved. And then the list goes on, Sandra Bland and so forth. It has created a callous when it comes to understanding, serving, and protecting. This makes your job harder, law enforcement. So especially for those who are trying to serve fairly, who are trying to distance themselves from what I call the so-called bad bunches, the bad apples in the bunch. How are you working daily to apply this passage to your vision as police chief?
Our mission statement, our beginning mission statement as Middletown Police is to serve and protect the public with honor, integrity, and professionalism, and that's the key. So when officers hire people, we have a written test, and then after that we have a physical fitness, and then we do a panel interview and a background check. We do a panel interview, and that's consisted of detectives, sergeants, a major, and then after that we go ahead and do a background check, and then after background we do a polygraph. So we're trying to find the best possible candidates that we can. Have different systems in place, such as an early warning system, that every 3 months my supervisors, my sergeants may say, hey, this officer has so many citizen complaints on him, what's going on? He has so many use of forces, what's going on? He's calling off sick all the time. That sergeant calls that officer in and says, hey, is everything all right? Because bottom line, officers are people. We have families,
Yes.
We have kids, we have mortgages, we fight with our wife like everybody else, and people don't understand that sometimes those officers bring those issues here, and it's our job to make sure there's nothing that's going on outside of their normal day that's affecting their job. And we start with the early warning system, we do extensive backgrounds, and then they also take, when they get hired in, they take an oath of office. And on top of that, we make them take an ethical oath of office too by the state. And you're gonna serve and protect without prejudice. And if we see any, that's just unexcusable. And we've had some candidates we've dismissed because we do ride-alongs, and they've made some comments that were racial. And they were in the process, and the FTO, the field training officers, came to the sergeant. They sent them home immediately packing, and they're crossed off the list. So I think we do an outstanding job, and I think we just have to do better overall in recruiting and training and finding the right candidates. And I really feel that the community needs to come out and ride with us too to see what we deal with on a regular basis.
Everybody wants to be understood, but not everybody is willing to understand. Please help me and the viewers and listeners understand the mind of an officer. When encountering high pressure moments like what we have seen and heard, it is easy to argue whether or not an officer acted in the proper way based on what they see, based on the issues to address an issue, a claim, a complaint, or a crime. So first, can you kind of let us in on the mind of an officer? And then two, to follow up, have you grown frustrated with the anti-police tone? Or are you sympathetic to the outrage and current mistrust?
Nobody wants to go to jail, right? Okay? And if, for example, we get a call of a DV, okay? Sometimes it's an act of disturbance, an act of domestic violence. People are screaming and yelling. So an officer goes from going in his car, say he's patrolling the streets, to, hey, we have an active disturbance where they're screaming and yelling, and the dispatcher saying we have an active disturbance and say there's guns involved, right? So the officer goes from being calm to his blood pressure and everything going sky high. He's trying to get there because he's trying to separate them and try to get them safe. And so you go from down low to up. Now, We practice de-escalation. We just sent all the officers through it this year and last year. And de-escalation is you try to use communication to de-escalate the system. Obviously, the people involved in the disturbance, their blood pressure and they're, excited and they're upset. The officer's blood pressure's up. He's on edge because he doesn't know what the situation is. So the officer's job is to defuse it, get everybody back down to neutral so we can communicate. But at times, it's a dangerous job. So at times, if somebody would like to prevent domestic violence charges, maybe that individual doesn't want to go to jail. And maybe they just don't want to get cuffed. Sometimes officers in certain situations may have to use force. We train our officers as force is used. We immediately sit them up, we check for injuries, and then we take them out to the hospital. We get them evaluated before we take them to the jail.
Because you're human. You're chief, but you're human. So when you're watching the news or listening or getting on social media, does it bother you because the anti-police tone has risen to an all-time level now? And does it cause you to become frustrated with it, or do you sympathize with the outrage based on?
It's a little bit of both, Kevin. I mean, it's both. I mean, I can sympathize with them, but if we defund the police anymore, every police department's running short. If we defund them and we put it in, say, social services, right? We try social services. We try counseling sessions. We got mental health people. We take them to the hospital. They kick them back out after evaluation. So if we're going to defund the police, we need to have a plan for defunding those police. We just can't cut the police because we have no other place to cut unless it's officers, personnel. I mean, we're bare bones as it is.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're Christ-centered, just like me, and just as you have to be a watchman in the city from your post, my role as a pastor, and for those pastors across the nation, they have to do the same in a spiritual sense. And we have to figure out how to work together. Jesus always wanted to challenge us on our so-called comfort zones. And I believe what's happened with COVID and then this racial injustice or this unrest is an opportunity for us to get out of our comfort zone, so to speak. And I don't believe that any Christ-centered individual should be comfortable with the status quo of what is happening in our nation. So that being said, do you believe that the church is unified or divided on the issues at hand when we're talking about Black Lives Matter? You have a segment of people who believe in that and said that needs to be the focus, but it's not saying that all lives don't matter, it's just saying that all lives can't matter unless Black Lives Matter. And then you have a group who are saying, why do we have to focus on Black Lives Matter? Let's just focus on all lives. And you have now Blue Lives Matter, and some people feel like that's detouring from the moment. And then the church has to decide what to do with that. Do you believe that the church is unified or divided on the issues at hand when it comes to those things?
I think we need, God created everything. He's our creator, he's our ultimate. And like I said earlier, the Constitution, the founders of the Constitution based a lot of that Constitution on the Bible. There's many, many verses in there that have taken it and used it to frame that Constitution of the United States. But I think right now, I can't speak about Black Lives Matter. I don't know what the agenda is, and I do feel that we have to have more of spiritual coming together.
And this conversation was not to roll out policy and things of that nature, but it was an opportunity to allow you to share your heart because you're in a tough situation, and unfortunately, the heat is on. No pun intended with it being so, but it's on. And you're having to work extra hard to be able to demonstrate that the Middletown Police Department will be as fair and just as the scriptures talk about. When you talk about the foundations of the Constitution and the scriptures behind that, there has to be more courageous conversation. I think the church has an opportunity to do that. And my hope and prayer is that pastors, white pastors, black pastors, brown pastors, Asian pastors will be able to have courageous conversations. I think we're divided on this because of the fact that our nation's history is not a glorious one. And it's real raw right now. And the church, not necessarily law enforcement, but the church has to be able to deal with this, because we need to model the change that we're hoping the world wants to see.
Yes.
And so we have to be able to acknowledge that Black lives do matter in order for all lives to matter. We have to acknowledge the fact that, yes, there are some bad police officers and agencies, but not all of them are.
Right.
We have to acknowledge that, yes, there is some funding issues that may need to be looked at, but to just eradicate policing in general would just cripple communities.
Yes.
And you think about Middletown, we have 6 officers that are able on a daily basis to serve a community of 49,000. That's difficult.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter what color you are. So we have to face those things. We also, from the Black community, got to understand, yes, we know that there's some other things we need to deal with, but we need to be able to figure out how to stay current and come unified in the sense of, hey, let's deal with this issue here. And let's acknowledge the fact that America is built upon what it's built upon, and be able to acknowledge it and be able to see, okay, how can we be better?
Yep.
But right now we're seeing a lot of deflection, and unfortunately law enforcement is smack dab in there. And so